Hey everyone, Yusuf here from Crafting Clouds, and in today's video, we're going to be going over page actions. So let's begin. So page actions is actions that run off of the page or the record that you're viewing in Method CRM. And there's three different page actions. It was a little bit of a confusing concept for me. So the purpose of this video is to kind of help you guys fully understand the purpose of these page actions and when to use them. So what I'm referring to, as you can see here, I'm in the screen designer for an estimate. So this is when you go ahead and you customize the screen and you go behind the scenes and look at all the guts of the screen and where you can go in and add in like, components and put in your logic and whatnot. So within the screen designer, what you would do is right from here, you would actually see it default to this tab. So you'll see four tabs on your properties panel on the right. The tab you want to go to is this paper icon. And in here, you're going to notice there's page actions listed below right here. So the page actions we're looking at are load, focus, and active record change. And you'll see there's already a bunch of actions already contained within here. We can open one up. And as you can see, there's a bunch of actions already contained within here. So what's the point of page actions? What's the purpose? The purpose of page actions is to essentially have you run automatic logic in the background as soon as a user goes and views an estimate, for example, or any record in Method. But for the case of this video, we're just going to reference the record that we're viewing as the estimate. So when do you use each, or what are they? So let's go over a definition. So a definition that Method has provided us in their help center is there are the load event. We're going to start with that. The load event is an event that triggers when the screen first loads or a user hits the refresh button, but before any data is loaded onto the screen. So think about it as a load event is you want to run some logic before someone goes and views the data for the estimate. So like the estimate total, the sales rep associated to the estimate, who the customer is. So before they even see the estimate, you want some logic to run before that data is available to them or visible to them. Second one is focus event. This event triggers when the screen first loads or a user hits the refresh button, but after any data is loaded onto the screen. So very similar to a load event, but instead we're saying we want to see the estimate, but we also want after the estimate is loaded for certain steps to occur in the background. And that is in those steps we're going to define in this section. Now, finally, active record change. This event occurs when the screen active record ID changes. Now, I think that for a lot of us that are watching this video, you might not be clear as to what a screen active record ID is. A screen active record ID, think about it this way. When you're looking at an estimate, right? You're looking at a particular ref number of that estimate, right? So if I go here and I hit close, all right, you'll notice right now I'm looking at estimate number 3. If I go back, you'll see there's 1, 2, 3 estimates with reference numbers, right? So if I go and I open up number 2, we're now looking at estimate number 2. Think of the screen active record ID as very similar to this, but instead it's a record ID that is set by Method that is unique. You cannot have two records with the same record ID, and it's set as soon as a record is saved. So if you're looking or if you're creating a brand new estimate, and before you even go ahead and you click the save button or you populate it with information, the estimate is not saved yet. So therefore there is no active record ID. But as soon as you hit save, Method is going ahead and it's specifying or it's assigning a number to that particular estimate in the background that's different to the reference number. This number is unique to Method only, but it's assigning this number because it needs to be entered into the estimate table for Method. And for anyone who understands how databases work, each record in a table needs a unique identifier, which is the record ID. So that screen active record ID is the unique identifier for that estimate logged in the table in Method. So if we go and we want to go back now and we want to look at another estimate, we are essentially changing the active record ID, because now we're moving from the previous estimate, which was one record ID that was saved to the table, to a different estimate, which is now a different record ID. So therefore, the record ID has changed. A record ID will also change when you're creating a new estimate, because when you start with a new estimate, there's no record ID on that estimate. It's blank because it hasn't been saved to the table yet. But then when you save that estimate, or where you're adding information to that estimate and it's being saved to the database, that database is now changing that record ID from a blank record ID, not having any record ID, to assigning it with a record ID, which would also trigger the active record ID change. So active record change. Okay. So I know that one could be a little confusing. I hope I made it clear for you guys. But now let's go into method and let's do an example. Okay. So you'll notice I already added some stuff just to display here to show you when these 3 page actions trigger. Okay. So if I just start from the top, okay, we're going to start at just looking at an existing estimate. So I'm going to open up estimate number 3 here. And you'll notice it triggered all 3 page actions. The load trigger changed because it's running a logic before we even see this estimate. So that already happened. Now, the focus trigger also changed because now the logic that runs after we view the estimate, it automatically ran. So that's been done. And then the active record change triggered as well, because now we moved away from the estimate list screen, which didn't have a record ID on that screen. We weren't looking at a particular record ID. We were looking at a list of estimates, which doesn't have a record ID. But as soon as we entered a particular estimate, we went from a screen that didn't have a record ID to a screen that we're viewing now of an estimate that does have a record ID. So therefore, the active record ID changed, right? Now, what if we were to create a new estimate? So if I go ahead and I click new, all right, look at this. Without me even going in and populating the customer and continuing on with creating this estimate, it already triggered the load page action as well as the focus page action. So that's how you know that there's already logic going on in the background that is controlling the way we interact with this estimate, that's defined by us, the customizers, that it has already been triggered based off of what we set in those particular page actions. So the load already triggered because before we even view the data on screen, so this stuff right here, look, before we even view the customers that we have, it's going ahead and it's saying, okay, I got to run some logic before they even access this screen, right? Now, because we're now on the screen and the load finished, and now we're viewing, data on the screen, like on the customer list here, the focus also triggered because now we're saying we want to have actions or logic run after data has been loaded to the screen, which as you can see here, we can see our customer list. Now, if I go and I choose a customer, so Dodger Inc., look at that. Now the active record change got triggered, okay? Why did this happen? Because we have essentially, what happened was is in method, when we choose a customer, it is saving the estimate for you automatically. So I didn't have to click the save button. It automatically saved this estimate as soon as I selected Dodger Inc. as my customer. So if I go back, you'll see this one right here just got created. This is the one that we just created right now. And it automatically triggered the active record change because we're saying we went from having a blank estimate that didn't have a record ID to now choosing a customer. And by choosing a customer within that logic in this particular customer dropdown, which I can show you, I might as well just to tie everything together clearly for you. If I go to this dropdown and I go to the change event, okay, there is a save right here, save all. This save all action is what's assigning this estimate with that record ID, which has triggered now the actions that we have against our active record change page action. So you'll see because it detected that the screen active record ID changed, it shifted from not having a record ID, being a blank estimate, to now having a record ID because that estimate has been saved. It went ahead and it triggered this, and it's triggering all this logic that we have defined here. Okay. So that is a simple example. Now, when would you use these page actions? You might be thinking, right? Well, think about it this way. I'll start with the active record change one as an example because that's probably going to be the most complicated scenario to talk through. So you'll see here I have a bunch of related estimates that are related to my customer Dodger Inc. Okay, so right now, if I go ahead and I just choose, I'm just going to save this. I'm going to say this is 5. Okay, estimate number 5. All right. So right now in this estimate, I'm looking at estimate number 5, but I see I also have estimate number 3, estimate number 2, estimate number 1. These are all related estimates to Dodger Inc. I want to be able to, within this list, click this particular number 2 estimate, for example, and view that estimate instead for Dodger Inc. So if I click it, it goes ahead and you'll notice right away the reference number changed from number 5, which we were previously on, to now number 2. So now we're looking at a different estimate. And look at this. It also triggered the active record ID to change, because what we did was we changed from estimate number 5 to estimate number 2, which triggered that active record ID change. So that's another scenario where that could happen. So within that active record ID change, we could have defined, okay, because I went from number 5 to number 2, maybe I want something else to happen when we go from one estimate related to Dodger Inc. to another estimate related to Dodger Inc. And you can go ahead and you can define what you want to have happen in that situation or in that scenario. Maybe you want to go to a completely different estimate belonging to a completely different customer. That's completely fine. For the sake of this video, I made it so that it's only for related estimates for the particular customer you're viewing for that estimate that you're viewing. So that is when you could use, you can think of a scenario where maybe when they're going from one estimate to a different estimate, maybe my sales team, when they're viewing estimates on the estimate screen and the active record ID or the estimate numbers are changing, I want to have a particular step only fire when they're going from one estimate to another. That is when you're going to use the active record ID change. Or I want this only to fire when we're creating a brand new estimate. Maybe you only want a certain piece of logic to fire when you're creating a brand new estimate. That is fine. That is when you would also use the active record ID change. Okay. Now, the next example is the load and the focus. Let's go into load. So load would happen before you go ahead and you view the data on the estimate, right? So what kind of actions would you want to put in a load for a particular scenario like that? Well, if I wanted validations to take place in the background to ensure that the user that's viewing this estimate has the right permissions to view that estimate, then I would want to put that in the load page action, because I only want those validations to trigger before they even view the data. So that's when you'd go and you'd add those validations in the load page action. Now, focus. This is probably the most popular in my time, and I've been using Method now for almost a decade. In my time, when I want actions to run automatically as soon as a user views a particular screen in Method, and in this case an estimate, I usually use the focus page action 90% of the time. The reason why is because you might want to have a logic run after they view the estimate. For example, what I like to do is maybe I don't want them to see a particular field after the screen is loaded. So I put all my show hide fields logic in my focus. So I look at maybe this person, if they have this particular permission, they shouldn't be able to see this amounts are field. So therefore, I'm going to go into my focus page action, and I'm going to make sure that after the page loads, that this drop down is also going to be hidden for that particular user. So I hope this was a straightforward enough video. Like I said, if you have any, if you're still confused a little bit by what was explained to you in this video, feel free to go ahead and reach out to me. We can go over it together on a call, no problem. I just want to help fellow Method users understand Method better so that they can start customizing on their own. Feel free to reach out to me on my website or email below, which will be in the description down below. Also, if you feel like I've done a great job in explaining this for you guys, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe also down below in the video. Other than that, I'll see you on the next one. Peace!